Okay, let me see. Okay, now I click on my own face, and now I can see me big, and I assume you can all hear me. This isn't awkward at all. Um, and in fact, the first joke I wrote doesn't really apply because I thought I wouldn't be able to hear everyone, but I sort of can. But I'm going to tell it anyways because it's an example of how crazy these times are. And the reason I don't have like a proper home office here is that I'm staying with my parents right now, so this is extra weird. So I was gonna say like, hey, how's everyone doing tonight? You don't have to answer. I can't hear you since we're on Zoom, which is a double failure now because we're not on Zoom. We're on like Mitsubishi or whatever this is called, and I can hear most of you because nobody has the. Well, I don't know. What would be the etiquette? Normally, like in a Zoom call, you're supposed to mute your mic, but in this case, we want to hear you laugh. But on the other hand, see, my phone keeps falling off the little tripod. Okay, so the rest of my joke was gonna be like, oh, it's fine that I can't hear you because I'm used to telling jokes and hearing complete silence. Um, but this is good because now I can just assume you're laughing hysterically, and then I would say, oh, please stop, I'm blushing. Thanks for the laughter, but please stop. I need to continue or I'll run out of time. Uh, oh, what, a standing ovation? I'm flattered, but please sit down. But of course, we can see that you're not standing up, so this doesn't work at all. But speaking of bad timing, let me tell you how bad my timing is. Last summer, I sold my condo in Toronto so I could be free to travel. And I didn't know where to go, so I was just hanging around Toronto for like 8 months. And then finally, at the beginning of March, I said, okay, I'm going to go to a podcast convention in Florida. And then I was like, I like Florida. I'm going to stay in Florida for a bit. And the universe is like, no, actually, we're going to give you a global pandemic and you have to come home. So I came back to Canada, and now I'm literally living in my parents' basement in Ottawa. So on the one hand, I'm safe from COVID because I get to stay in the basement. But on the other hand, I'm kind of like, would COVID be that bad? Because in the hospital, I wouldn't be constantly nagged and told I'm a failure. I don't think doctors have time for that, but my parents have time for that. I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding. They can hear me. That's an open floor plan here. Uh, I get my dad was watching videos on his phone in the living room. I'm like, hey, maybe put on headphones for the show. He's like, no, no, no. I'll just turn it off and I can listen. I'm like, God, no. Anyways, I told my parents yesterday that I was going to do this show, and I said, I should probably write jokes about the pandemic because that's what's on everyone's mind. And my dad is like, no, it's too soon. I'm like, really? It, it, like I'm doing this show over Zoom. Do you think people maybe have already noticed that something's a bit off? Or like something's maybe it's on their mind. I feel like if I did jokes about the Titanic instead, they'd be like, "Is that the most relevant disaster to be referring to right now?" But I guess the most relevant disaster right now is all the riots happening in the U.S. today. But I think it's too soon to joke about that. But I should be joking about Trump apparently because all the late night comedians they do nothing but make fun of Trump. Um, and the media blames him for the riots and the pandemic and everything. And I figure, okay, if you don't like a politician or their policies, you're entitled to your opinion. But I just wish the media didn't have to lie. Like when you lie, then it kind of hurts your own argument. For example, they've been saying for 2 months, Trump said the coronavirus is a hoax. It's a hoax. And I said, well, if you actually look at the articles, they always say Trump called the coronavirus a hoax. But if you look at what he actually said, there's a reason they only put the word hoax in quotes and nothing else. It's because he didn't say any of the other parts. He was actually saying the Democrats claim that his administration isn't properly dealing with the coronavirus, and so that's their new hoax, saying he's not dealing with it right. But that's not the same thing as calling something a hoax. That's like you saying to your wife, hey, honey, I'm going to go out to get a bag of groceries. And then CNN reports, man calls his wife a bag. I'm like, no, but that's not, you can't just take one word out of a sentence. All right, we got a lot of Trump haters here. See, this is why I wish I couldn't hear your silence. Now I know that you're just not actually making noise. Um, but overall, I like the pandemic because it means I don't have to have my usual FOMO, which is what the kids call a fear of missing out. That's what FOMO means. Because usually I feel I'm always sitting around going, "Oh, I feel bad. I'm not a movie star yet." But well, now nobody's making movies, so we're all on the same level. Or usually I wish I was back in university, best days of my life. Well, nobody's at university now, and usually I wish I had friends, but nobody can see their friends now. So I'm enjoying this pandemic. And another good thing about the pandemic is that I don't have to deal with people because that often stresses me out. Like even things you would think are positive, like people holding doors for me. And I know, like, you know, if you're walking to a mall and somebody's ahead of you, they hold the door open so you can come through. But I don't know. I know that's supposed to be polite, but it drives me nuts because it puts too much pressure on me now. Because I was happy with my current walking pace, but if somebody stops to hold the door and now, okay, I've got to speed up because if I keep walking at the same pace, clearly I'm not valuing their time and their effort. I got to show, even if I was walking quickly, I got to be like showing extra quick now because now I have to speed up. And then, what if the last second I decide I don't even want to go into the mall? Well, now I have to go into the mall because otherwise he's been holding the door for me and now I'm just looking like a jerk by not going in. So now I've got to go into the mall and then come back out another door. So all of this is wasting my time. And then, of course, if somebody's behind me, now I have to hold the door for them as well to show that I'm paying it forward. And what's this all saving me? Like like half a second of me, opening the door myself because and you're supposed to be opening the door yourself anyways. That's why there's a door. If there was supposed to be like an open door, there just wouldn't be a door at all. Anyways, so that's why I'm glad there's the pandemic because nobody's holding doors for anybody. Nobody's going through doors. But I guess social interaction is kind of a human need, as the scientists say. So it's good that we have technology to keep us connected at this time. I just think we don't really appreciate technology enough. It develops so gradually that we don't appreciate how amazing it is. For instance, a few months ago, I took my 5-year-old nephew to the bathroom. We were at the Pickle Barrel restaurant, and they had a tap where you wave your hands under the tap, and then the water magically turns on. And to my nephew, he's like, yeah, that's just how taps are. And even to adults, we're like, yeah, whatever, it's not a big deal. It's an infrared light or something. But part of me is like, wait a minute, that's amazing that you can magically wave your hands and water comes out. And I wish I could tell someone about this who would be equally, like, who would be amazed. Like, it would be interesting to share technology with someone who hasn't heard of something like that. So I've made up a person in my head who I pretend that I go back in time to talk to. His name's William, and he's a peasant in the year 1500 in a village in England. And so I went back in time to his village, and I told him about this tap. And he was like, "Oh, that's amazing. You wave your hands and water appears. This must save you so much time." And I was like, "Well, like a little bit of time. Like, what do you mean?" He's like, "Well, now you don't have to walk miles to the river to wash your hands. Surely that's why your greatest scientists spent all this time creating this magic tap." I said, "Well, no, it's just instead of having to lift the little handle for water to come out." And he's like, "Oh, well, that's wonderful. That must mean you've cured cancer." I'm like, "Well, no. Then why are you wasting time on taps that you don't have to touch?" I'm like, "Listen, William, don't get all like highfalutin on me. Like, you're living in a mud hut, right?" And he's like, "Well, you're living in your parents' basement." And I'm like, "It's a pandemic." And he's like, "You were living there before the pandemic." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm like, "You don't even have a basement, William." And he's like, "Well, neither do you. Your parents have the basement." I'm like, "Okay, I feel like I should come up with a new imaginary friend because it didn't go well when I told him about the pandemic either. I'll tell you about that another time. But in general, it was like, "Oh, you have to stay inside and watch Netflix. That's your plague? Poor baby." I'm like, "Okay, just wait till I tell him I had to do a comedy show over Zoom, and then he'll be really feeling sorry for me." So that's my time. Thank you from me and William.